Well, welcome to the Monday Night Mastermind. Tonight we are talking about property or multifamily mastermind, and tonight we're going to talk about standards and building your standards around buying property. I always talk that there's a number of different platforms that you need to think about, and we're going to cover all those real quick. But I want tonight to be focused on buying standards. So Edward Deming said that if you can't describe what you are doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. I think it's pretty realistic to understand that if you don't have a plan in place and you don't know how you're going to build things out, that it's pretty easy to get confused and to not know what you're doing. So let's talk about the different types of standards first. We have there's personal standards. We're going to have standards around buying. We're going to have standards around building an exit plan, tenant standards, screening standards, and rental standards. They all come into play when we're in the multifamily space or the real estate space at all. But when we talk about personal standards, I really want you guys to think and zone in for yourself for a minute about some personal standards for yourself. How about your fitness? If you're not fit in your own life, fitness is more than just health, but it's emotional and mental health too. And if we're not fit in our own lives, it's hard for us to go ahead and do anything else. So before you can even set a business standard, your personal life really must be in a rhythm that is effective for you, where you can work things out and know how to look at things long term. A lot of times people look at things very short term. And I believe that when we are working in business for ourselves, entrepreneurial or real estate, that we need to look further than just today or just for ourselves, but we need to look down the road. Look at where you are in each of these areas and categories in your own life, and what would it be like to move forward, and what would you do differently if you did move forward? And then there's buying standards. The next step is to define the product type and the niche that you're going to go into. Focus on the development and the refinement of a set of non-negotiable buying standards. So, when we set these standards, some of them are going to be negotiable. Some of them we can move on and be flexible on, but some of them have to be non-negotiable, where we literally can't waver from them. What I find is that if you move off those standards, those non-negotiable ones, that's where we find ourselves getting in trouble. So, and when I talk about being in trouble, I mean, where we get tenants that are out of line, or we get rents that are out of line, and we're not able to straighten those things out. We have repairs that we can't complete just because we haven't paid enough attention. Simply put, each investor has their likes and dislikes. For instance, I disliked shoveling snow and plowing snow, but I enjoyed playing golf later in the season. So because of those interests in my own life, that caused me to go to places and buy real estate that it was warmer, longer in the year. We didn't have that snow. We didn't have to worry about shoveling snow or plowing snow. Proper standards and strategies provide a blueprint in the development of exit and the operations, market niches, acquisition, and liquidations. Clarity of personal and business goals assist in the development of standards and strategies. My transition from single-family real estate to apartment investing turned out to be a very educational experience. The mistakes I made early on in the first property that I bought, and not really doing due diligence and listening to the seller and taking the seller's word for everything, really was a good mistake. And I don't believe mistakes are bad for you. I believe that you can take a mistake and you can move on. And what that first issue did was it caused me to move on and buy another 3,900 units in other parts of the country that became a lot more profitable. So I think that we need to look at our business from a standpoint of how do we benefit from it, whether we make a mistake or whether we do things right. Multifamily opportunities that we need to look at. And in the multifamily space, when we're designing standards, we need to know what interests us and what we really want to look at. But multifamily opportunities are market rate rentals. This is what I like. This is working house properties. So this is your blue collar, middle management or lower management people that are living in those rental units. Then there's student housing. There's tax credit deals. There's low income and affordable housing properties. There's senior housing and there's medical housing. So these are all different categories that you could find yourself spending time in, looking for different types of property. And then we want to look at product and market classes. And product and market classes are classified A, B, C, and D. And I'm going to touch base a little bit on what each one of these categories are, but they are pretty extensive. And what you want to do is you want to do the research around what each of those product categories are and how they will fit into your own buying criteria. So market locations are really important. And how do we justify market locations? You know, a local market, is that where we want to be buying our property? Do we want to be close to our home, close to where we live? Or do we want to be in a national market? Do we want to have to travel somewhere outside of our own area or our own backyard? When we take a look at market locations, there's three types of markets. You have your primary market. That's your MSA, your metropolitan service area. That's your Chicago, your New York, your Los Angeles. But then there's a secondary market. Those are markets outside of your primary markets. So if you're in Detroit, or actually Detroit is more of a secondary market. It's not one of your primary MSAs. A San Antonio is outside of your primary markets. It's a secondary market. But then you have a tertiary market. And a tertiary market is more going to be like out in the country, right? So I bought a property one time in a tertiary market 30 miles, 35 miles outside of Indianapolis. Indianapolis was a secondary market. But this tertiary market was out in the middle of a farm field. And you might say, well, why would I want to be out in the middle of a farm field? Well, the reason was that Walmart was building a super Walmart right across the street from the property. I knew it was going to add 3,000 jobs to the marketplace, which really all of a sudden changes the dynamics, changes your population, changes the job growth. And you can see that there's going to be rent increases. You're going to be able to do things to the property that'll substantiate rent increases so that you can recoup your money. So they're all things that you need to look at. So I always talk to people about thinking through the fundamentals. It's really important that we think through what we're trying to do. Fundamentals create predictability while reducing risk. So if you think through every choice that you make, every purchase that you buy, the way you're going to exit a property, you have an opportunity to make smarter choices. When we make smarter choices, we have better results as a result of that. You might think that utilizing insider secrets to think through those strategies help avoid mistakes, but all the insider secrets do is they give you an edge. You still have to think it through and decide, what if I go this way and the market doesn't respond like I thought it would? What if Walmart decides not to build that super Walmart in that cornfield? And how do I handle any job loss in the area or loss of population in the area? These are things you need to think through. That's why I always talk about exit planning. Exit planning is really an important strategy. When you buy a property, ever before you close on that property, you want to be sitting down, figuring out what your 5, 7, 10-year plan is with that property. Am I going to refinance it? Am I going to pull capital out? Am I going to bring a partner in? Am I going to sell it? Am I going to exit completely? Or am I going to have some other strategy along the way? Exit planning doesn't necessarily always mean that you sell. It may also mean that you're going to capitalize on some kind of an income return or a tax incentive or a depreciation incentive that's going to cause you to to make that property a little bit more profitable for yourself. One of the beliefs that I have is a Class A property investor should consider strategically targeting value add properties. They believe I believe that there's a tremendous upside and rent growth through the implementation of minor and moderate repairs. It offers a strong alternative to other classes of property. So you could go buy an A-class property, but an A-class property costs you more money. You might not have to do any repairs to it, but your upside is not good. But what it does for you is it provides you a stable return. Year after year, you'll get the same coupon. You're not going to do a lot of repairs. You're not going to have a lot of out-of-pocket, but you're not going to have a lot of upside. Where if you take a B-class property and you push it to try and make it a higher B-class property or a low A-class property, what you have the opportunity to do is now you have the opportunity to change the dynamics of that property, to increase the income. I talked about that property that in the tertiary market outside of Indianapolis, and it was a 64 unit apartment complex, all 3 bedrooms with 1.5 bathrooms. Property when I bought it was 98% occupied. Well, we drove that property to be 100% occupied consistently for 5 years because of some of the work we did on the property. Plus, we were able to raise the rents. It happened to be a property where the average rent was $200 a month lower than the market rent. And we were able to raise those rents $150 a month. We increased the profitability of that property. And when we went to sell it to the next buyer, we had left enough on the bone, enough meat on the bone for them to take advantage of an upside that they really were able to take advantage of. You know, I found my sweet spot in multifamily property buying market rate rentals. If I bought a property that was somewhere between 150 and 250 units, and don't be intimidated by the size or the numbers that I talk about, because I never thought that I'd buy a 200 or a 400 unit apartment complex. But what happens is over time, you buy something a little bit bigger. I bought 11, 64, 87, 187. And you all of a sudden you figure out that you can do a little bit more and you can push the envelope a little bit more. Ultimately wound up buying 4,000 units. Like I said, when I acquired that first deal, though, I didn't think that I would ever be able to do that. So we're going to talk now about 4 different categories. And I believe that when you start to create buying standards for yourself, you want to look at these categories. But group 1 is really about the location. And I would write some of these notes down for yourself as you think this through for your own purchases. But when we talk about location, let's talk about the property and where it's located. Do you like the area? Is it an area you want to be in? Is it an A area, B area, C area? How do you, what are the demographics? When you look at the area, what's the population doing? What's the job growth doing? If you were to walk into the village economic development department and ask them what their 20-year vision was for the area, would you be wanting to own properties in that area? And then how about property class? A, B, C, or D? I always bought B or C properties because I knew that I could make money in those categories. And the more B I bought, the less C I bought because I just didn't want to go into that tranche of properties anymore. And then market rate apartments. I didn't get involved in any tax deals or any other incentives, no affordable housing or senior housing. I have a friend right now who's building senior housing buildings and he's knocking it out of the park. I mean, it's a very profitable business. But so is market rate rents. I want to buy something that when I walk away from the closing table is operational and I'm making money right now as a direct result of that. I want to look in markets that are emerging and stable. Why did I buy in that tertiary market in central Indiana? Because it was an emerging market. I had Walmart building a super Walmart there. I had another company outside of town that was building a carbon engineering or carbon manufacturing plant for engines for police cruisers. And so those two opportunities cause that market to be emerging. We talk about stable markets. My belief is that if something is stable or it's flat, it's really not. It's going backwards because you're either going forward or you're not. And if you're in a situation with a property with population growth, with job growth, that it's stable, it's not stable. Pay attention because it's moving backwards. And you really want to try and stay out of situations like that. You want to be in areas that are moving forward. Group two is your pricing and what you're looking for in the product itself. So when I look at group two, I say, okay, my sweet spot was that 150 to 250 units. Yours might be 4 units to 8 units. Yours might be 2 units to 4 units. Yours could be 12 to 25 units. But whatever it is, find that sweet spot, learn how to work in that sweet spot so that you can make money. And I've talked about this before, and I like to have properties that are 60% or greater, 2 bedrooms or more, that are throwing off an NOI, a net operating income of 50% or less. This way, what I have is I have a resaleable product that works for most investors in the marketplace. Because most investors want to find a 2-bedroom product, and they want an NOI that is going to be 50%. Because if I'm at 50%, I know I can pay my debt, and I know that I'm going to be profitable. When I buy a property, I want to be somewhere between $50,000 to $80,000 per door, all in cost. So if I buy something for 50, can I put 5 or 10,000 into that door, but be able to push the rents to substantiate a good return? So these are the things that I want to look at. I can figure that out on the back of a cocktail napkin at a coffee shop when I am, looking at a property. So I'll go out, I'll look at a property, I'll go sit at a restaurant, and I'll just write out everything that I can think of about the property to start that exit planning, to start that strategy about how I'm going to get out of it. Getting in it's easy. It's getting out of it. And they say that in real estate, you make your money going in, but we don't profit till we get out. That's when we realize our gain. I always liked properties that were a 7% cap rate or better. The problem in today's market, though, is that cap rates that's a high cap rate. If you found properties that were maybe a 5.5, maybe a 6% cap rate, that's probably a good place to be. But that's probably even still pushing the market a little bit. You have to look in the area that you're going to be in, see what the average cap rate is. And the cap rate, just in general, a quick, easy rule of thumb about cap rate means that if you paid all cash for a property and the cap rate was 7%, you'd make 7% on your money every year. Now, I tell you that because you can do a lot better when you add leverage to the example, and when you put a loan on there and you are leveraged, you make a little bit better than that. And then I want to find properties, or try to find properties, that are long-term ownership, that have been owned by property owners for many years, by the same owner. Because what happens is, in that case of that property in central Indiana, Turtle Creek, that was owned for 37 years by the same owner. And when the owner was getting rid of it, I found that all these rents, over 50% of the rents were more than $200 a month below market rate. And the reason for that is that owner, he had long-term tenants, he built these relationships with people, he never raised their rent, people got to stay there, and he was just, kind of happy with the way things went. We were able to go there, do some upgrades, and believe it or not, even pushing the rents, most of that tenant base stayed. They didn't leave because there weren't many 3 bedrooms in the area. So that was a big plus for us in that market. Then there's group three. Group three really talks to me about my aesthetics, what I want to look at when I look at something, okay? I want to look at an exterior that's got some brick and maybe partial or an all brick building. I want to look at interior entrances. I want to be able to go to my apartment. I have to walk into a hallway. My roofs, I want my roofs to be pitched roofs, not flat. I want those roofs to be asphalt where I can, it provides a little bit more aesthetics. So those are typically your garden market apartments. They're 2 to 3 stories normally, indoor components. And the interiors I like to see, and a lot of times in the B class property, now as a few more years go down the road here, we're able to see some of those B class properties come up that have 9-foot ceilings, granite countertops, some hardwood. These things are preferred, but they're not required. I can be flexible on these. Remember I talked about non-negotiables in the beginning? These are not any non-negotiables. All of these are negotiable items. If I can make the deal work financially, and I know I can do even better with it and be able to trade out of that deal at a profit where my buyer is going to benefit, then I'll do the deal, even if I don't meet some of these standards. And then group 4, I want to look at, is it a value add? Can I go in and put some money into the property? If I go in and I do some upgrades and I put maybe new cabinet doors on or countertops or put a bathroom in, new floor coverings, maybe I add some curb appeal to the property itself. Am I able to raise the rents, bring a better tenant base in as a result of that, get a higher cap rate, and go ahead and exit the property? Multiple amenities. Amenities are really big in properties, right? Do I have a dog park? Do I have a park on the property? Do I have a place that is a business center? What kind of options do I offer my tenants? Can I re-engineer the property? So maybe I go in and it's just run down. It's got a wrong tenant base for the market. Maybe the management is not operating properly. Maybe I can go in and make a bunch of changes that are going to re-engineer that property and be able to reposition it in the marketplace and go ahead and sell off the property. Do I have rental, what's my rental increase potential? Are my vacancies 15% or greater? A lot of people will walk away from a deal when the vacancies are that high. And now remember, when you look at vacancies, it doesn't always necessarily mean that it's just physically vacant. A lot of times there's an economic vacancy that goes along with that. And that economic vacancy is somebody's living in the property, but they're not paying rent. And if they're not paying rent, that causes that economic vacancy. So you might have a 5 or an 8% physical vacancy, but you could have another 5 or 8% of an economic vacancy. So now you're at 15 or 16%. That starts to really tax the finances, and you have to watch that and pay attention to it. Then there's repairs and rehabs. What can I do? There's a saying in the industry, can I go in and put some lipstick and a new skirt on the pig and make it look better and fix it up and be able to raise the rent, get it resold, and make a profit? It's about the profitability on one hand, but the other thing is, what do I do to the community by doing it? Do I enhance the community, the shareholders, the people around it, the stakeholders that are the other small businesses in the area? The street, when you drive by the property, have I made the front of it look better and the curb appeal be better? How about management? Is the management failing today? And if I take it over, will I be able to put a new management in place and cause that property to operate better because of management? So these are all things I want you to think about. So I know the last week, a couple of weeks, we've been talking about building standards and how do you design a plan for yourself to move forward to be building a product that is going to work for you in your portfolio. Like I said, don't let the numbers scare you. If you're talking 2 to 4 units, that's fine. build a small portfolio, upgrade into larger properties. Then if you're talking about bigger properties right now, either way, you know what? Here's what I like about these systems. These systems are scalable. So if I'm doing it on 2 units, I can do it on 20 units. And if I'm doing it on 20, I can do it on 200 units. So the systems and the standards all work. It becomes about your own creativity and how you can do things to turn things around now. So what I want to do now is I just want to open it up for a few questions. If anybody has any questions, you can jump in.
I don't have any questions. I thought it was a good lecture.
Say it again, Robert.
Oh, that I don't have any questions. I just wanted to commend you. It was a good lecture.
Oh, good. Thank you. Sharice, any questions tonight or?
Oh, I'm sure I have several. Sorry. So
That's all right.
reading it again, and just doing research. So, we've identified a market area geographically. And I think I mentioned last week, they're all old buildings. So we've zoned in on, I think, B and C buildings. As we're looking at the cost analysis and trying to figure out financing, what percentage of your, and we're looking at probably primarily conventional loans, how do you factor in that renovation? So the initial things that you see just from, looking at the pictures or walking the property, paint jobs, things like that, into that initial cost analysis, as you're budgeting for, taking ownership or, making an offer on that property and negotiating. There's a listed price, but, because we're going to have to come in and, do these things, X, Y, and Z, how do you, I don't know, it's one thing on a single family home that you're buying for yourself, but when you're looking at, an investment property, how do you negotiate and deduce, off the sell price and then add that into your budget for those properties?
Okay, great question. Okay, and I think you probably have 4 or 5 questions in there, but
Yes, there are.
let me
Answer whichever one you want to.
Yeah, let me do the best I can and try and kind of give you an overview. But remind me again, you're going to be buying property in how many units?
So we're focusing right now on 2 to 4 units.
Okay,
I think that's where we're going to get our feet.
Okay.
Yeah, residential. Mm-hmm.
So on the residential side, so typically what you're going to find on a residential product is if you go out there and you're buying something retail, okay, so it's listed with a realtor and the product is livable, there's people in it, it's occupied, and you know that you're going to be able to rent it. Chances of there being a lot of, extra damage that you're not going to notice are pretty slim. You're going to tell, and even walking through, even the novice with an eye that doesn't have an eye for construction will know if there's, a problem with the foundation. If you look at the walls and you look at the ceilings, you'll see if the roof is leaking. If you stand back on the street and you look at the roof and there's a lot of extra deterioration, you might have some challenges with the roof. A lot of times what I like to do is try and ask a tenant questions. So if I'm at a property and I'm walking a property, I'll ask a tenant, hey, if you were the owner of this property, tell me something you would change. And you would be surprised. It's like opening up Niagara Falls when you ask a question like that. People start to talk and they're just so glad somebody's going to listen about the problems or the issues that they have. Now, what you have to do as a rational person is think through those issues and say, well, listen, he's got a stove that doesn't work, or really there's a real issue, whatever that might be. Once you decide that you're going to buy a property and you put an offer in on a property, and especially on the residential side, you have the option then, and there's usually a a 4 to 7 business day clause in there where you can come in and have a home inspection done. And you can bring an inspector in. If you have a friend who's a contractor of yours, bring them with when you're out looking at the property the first time. Somebody who you can trust. You know, make sure you don't do this though. A lot of times I feel people will find a deal killer because they're jealous. So I'll bring my cousin with, who's a contractor, and he's real good at what he does, but he's just, you know, he doesn't have enough money to go out and buy an investment property himself. So he's going to try and kill this deal for me because he's jealous of my success or what I'm going to do. So you have to watch out for people around you in your own life that do those types of things also. You want to make sure that you know, again, this goes back to team building, right? Surround yourself with people who are bought into your success and are going to help you being successful. So one of those people that you have hopefully built a relationship with or started to build a relationship with is a contractor or an inspector, somebody you can pull out to a property. You know, after you've bought in a couple, you are going to kind of have an idea of what to look for and the things that work. And on that initial inspection going through, you'll see. A lot of times the broker will tell you, hey, you know, it's a handyman special, or this place needs repair, or, you know, sometimes a broker will just start telling you all kinds of things. Even an owner might tell you, you know, this is a problem, this is an issue, this needs to be fixed, these are the things that need to be done. So, you know, when you walk through, just have a good eye, write down any things that might come of question to you, you know. A lot of times it's cosmetic stuff and you really can't, you know, but if there's a lot of cosmetic issues, then chances are there's some infrastructure issues as well that you need to be cautious of.
Okay.
So hopefully that helps. You know, it's a lot of information, but it boils down to experience. It boils down to going out and looking at some buildings. Go out with a broker, go out and look at some buildings that are by owner, and look at 8 or 10 different buildings. Because you got to get a handle on pricing. You have to get a handle on product. You have to go out there and just kind of start to get comfortable with what you're looking at. And don't be afraid to look at 5, 8, 10 buildings before you say, okay, now I'm ready to find something to buy. Now I feel comfortable enough that, hey, if I walked into something and it looked okay, I could buy it. Or if it looked disastrous, I could buy it because I know that I could get it fixed and I'm buying it right. So it comes down to pricing.
Okay. Okay.
Does that help?
All right. Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, good, good. Anything tonight, Tony?
Hey, Mike. No, it was very informative. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. Good. All right, I'm gonna shut the recording off here.
I do have another question if no one has one.
Sure, go ahead.
So on the value add side, and in terms of your, when you make that commitment to the property, do you have usually an idea of, so when you're assessing a property,